Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker hardly needs an introduction. However, for the few of you who have not heard of him, and I'm sure that's very, very few of you, let me say these few things about him. Our speaker is President and Chief Executive Officer of Benguet Corporation, and he is also President of the Chamber of Mines of the Philippines. The Chamber of Mines of the Philippines is an association advancing the interest of mining, quarrying, and mineral processing companies for the efficient exploration, development, and utilization of minerals in consonance with sound economic, environmental, and social policies. The association consists of members coming from exploration, mining, mineral processing, and services industries, including professional associations. The members are united by a shared commitment to the principles of economic growth, sustainable development, and as government's partners in development. Our speaker has been and continues to be an articulate voice and advocate of the Philippine mining industry. At the Philippine Mining Conference and Exhibition that was held at Sofitel from the 13th to the 15th of September this year, our speaker ensured that the major issues that confront the mining industry in our country were aired and discussed with the key stakeholders, including among them DNR Secretary Ramon Paje, Executive Secretary Paquito Ochoa, Presidential Advisor on Environment Protection Nerios Acosta, World Wildlife Fund Philippines President Jose Maria Lorenzo Tan, and Philippine Business for Social Progress Executive Director Rafael Lopa. And indeed, and I can report, these discussions were vigorous, frank, but in the style of our speaker, always diplomatic, but very constructive. Outcomes of the Philippine Mining Conference include positive commitments from Secretary Paje relating to the implementation of the moratorium on mining applications. Second, a balanced scorecard for the mining industry that was recommended by Mr. Lopa of Philippine Business for Social Progress, and the revival of the Minerals Council, and so on. Events of significant consequence to the mining industry have occurred recently, such as the following. An NPA attack on a nickel project in Surigao, reportedly destroying 3 billion pesos worth of equipment and infrastructure. Second, President Aquino's call today on environmental experts in the government to craft an environmental policy. I am sure that many of these matters are at the top of your minds this afternoon. Indeed, what our guest speaker will say to us today will be very, very timely. Ladies and gentlemen, to bring us up to date on very, very important developments in the mining industry, please join me warmly welcome to the podium the President of Benguet Corporation and President of the Chamber of Mines of the Philippines, my colleague and good friend, Mr. Benjamin Philip Romualdez.
Thank you very much, Leo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a good lunch. I always enjoy Bistek Tagalog, and I always enjoy a good salmon sinigang. So thank you very much to the sponsors for providing such a delicious lunch. And also, before I get into the discussion, I wanted to say a big thank you to Kevin. Where are you? For inviting the Chamber of Mines today. Thank you very much, Kevin. Kevin deserves a big round of applause for gathering us in these functions this past 4 times. In fact, I apologize. I wasn't able to come in the previous occasions, but I'm glad we're here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Leo actually gave such a good overview of what I was about to say. I almost feel like I don't need to say too much. Fill in the details. Okay, actually, I'm not sure how articulate I am because since we've been pushing up the Chamber of Mines, we've hired a Vice President for Communications, and I'd like to acknowledge his presence to introduce you, Mr. Rocky Di Maculangan. Rocky's I don't think he agrees with Leo about my being articulate because he prepared a very comprehensive presentation, all with speaking notes. So I think he wants me to stick to message. But we'll have an open forum afterwards. The other person I'd like to introduce who's new to the Chamber of Mines and who will be your brother in arms and champion in this battle that we are in is Attorney Ronnie Residero. Attorney Ronnie used to work with Lepanto. He's a lawyer and he's full time with the Chamber of Mines. He's in charge of policy, legal affairs, and public policy issues. So these are two recent additions to the team at the Chamber of Mines, and of course we wouldn't be able to do what we do without the guiding hand of our chairman, Mr. Artemio Dicini. Mr. Art, Chairman Art. Okay. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, a lot's happened since our Mining Philippines that took place about 2 months ago. In fact, we've had a October 6 Chamber of Mines meeting, which occurred just a few days after the Surigao attack. And it was in that meeting that we were able to quickly call and have them join us, and they are the Philippine National Police Chief, the head of the Philippine National Police, the Department of Interior and Local Government Secretary, Jesse Robredo, and also we also had Secretary Ramon Paje join us at that meeting to precisely address the issues that we were confronting that very week. And I'll be happy to tell you a little bit more about that. But we at the Chamber of Mines have been very active, as you know, and in fact, if you will have seen some of the newspapers and some of the media space, issues that are not even remotely attributable to the industry are being attributed to us. And so it compelled us the other day to come out with ads in newspapers that essentially condemned the killing of our beloved Italian priest father, and at the same time calling upon the government to quickly come to arrest those who perpetrated the crime. It's unfortunate that many people who are the detractors of our industry have taken advantage of this sad situation and are trying to attribute this to the mining industry. And I understand that there is another Catholic Educators Association that just today issued another statement and is trying to link, I think even the Tampakan project to that issue. So again, a preposterous allegation for which the Chamber of Mines will be answering swiftly and promptly, as vigorously as necessary. So the final common statement to that issue is that we will not take any blank, blank, blank from anybody, and we will answer and face the issues, whether they're wearing a cloth or holding a gun. So that is the commitment of the Chamber of Mines to you and the mining industry. I just wanted that to be your message to you and to our reporter friends back there. Now, just wanted to make sure there's a quick disclaimer. I thank very much First Metro for talking about Benguet Corporation and Benguet stock, but I assure you, and I made sure that the reporters heard this, I did not speak to the First Metro prior to this discussion. I had no idea that they were going to make such a presentation, but I thank them nonetheless. Also, and if asked a few questions, just to address the question before it's asked, it's always a good time to buy Benguet Corp stock. Thank you very much. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, my discussion today really will come in two parts. The first part, if you allow me, will be the outcome of the mining conference. Well, we would like to think the conference was quite a success. We had 4 cabinet secretaries, a congressman, heads of various organizations, over a dozen ambassadors and more than a dozen and dozens of industry leaders joining us at the conference. And I would like to say that there was a great deal of optimism among them, and many recommendations that were put forward are being taken into consideration. In fact, we are continuing to work on that growth trajectory for our sector. Now, importantly, I think the President was there through a representation by his Executive Secretary. So in that keynote address of the President delivered by Secretary Ochoa, he had made many statements. I think his statements certainly lifted the enthusiasm of the participants, and we in the Chamber, despite the many challenges, are optimistic on our continued growth trajectory. The Chamber of Mines applauds the President in support of large-scale mining. I mean, if you recall, and if you look at the newspapers today, the President did make a statement yesterday wherein he does support large-scale mining, and he made that statement during the Leyte Gulf landing anniversary yesterday. Now, given the recent historic highs of metals mining around the world, our mineral-rich nation has once again emerged as a premium location for minerals investment. A perfect time, I would like to think, for the government to help us in this thrust and also to help eradicate poverty. As you know, we have a growing population of nearly 94 million Filipinos, and it is only proper for our country's leaders to tap our mineral resources, especially where there now exists. Mining technology that allows the extraction of minerals in a way that mitigates the negative impact of the environment, while at the same time, as you know, creating socioeconomic benefits, from which communities that we all participate in are in fact benefited. Large-scale responsible mining has the capability to do this, but I'm sure you all know this because we are all part of this. However, I'd like to stress that the initiative of the President to form a panel to craft a comprehensive mining policy for the Philippines is very much welcome and is very much needed, especially since the Minerals Development Council has been, in effect, disbanded. Uncertainty in the country's minerals policy is a key factor that has inhibited the entry of many investors, not just foreign, but even local. We also welcome the pronouncement that all mining stakeholders will be consulted in this policy. I would like to state that, in fact, we have already been doing that. The Chamber of Mines had submitted a position to the Executive Secretary for the President's consideration only last week, wherein we outlined many of the key issues as what we discussed during the mining conference. Now, together with the Philippine Business for Social Progress, led by its director, Mr. Rafael Lopa, who, by the way, is the first cousin of the President, we will, as an industry, design a standard report on how we are meeting social, environmental, and economic needs of the communities where we operate. We intend to come up with a CSR, a Corporate Social Responsibility Scorecard, along the lines of our CSR guidebook, which we launched last year, serving as our tool in implementing our social development management programs as mandated by the Philippine mining law, but more importantly, for where we can actually measure our initiatives and the benefits they actually bring. Because the big question and challenge that we are facing is, while we make certain statements that we are in fact planting trees or educating people, we have not been able to validate that, so a scorecard is in fact quite necessary. As we live in a very difficult climate today, where climate change is a real concern, not just in the rural areas, but also here in urban areas, we have increased the need for more green areas in the countryside. Therefore, the mining industry, as you all know, is viewed as an industry that can either make or break the future of the environment in our midst. At least that is what is being portrayed. Therefore, our chamber has agreed to collaborate with the World Wildlife Fund under the leadership of Mr. Lorenzo Tan, wherein we will push for an integration of area development in the protection of biodiversity, intelligence allocations of resources that, as you all know, are the lifeline of our people, and in bringing the level of mining at a par where industrialized, resource-driven countries are already operating. The industry has already in place third-party monitoring of our activities, including those pertaining to our environmental management systems. In fact, a number of our member companies are already ISO certified. Another initiative that we've started is a memorandum of understanding was signed with the Department of Education, whereby the Chamber, through its member companies, has committed to, among others, support, publicize, promote, as well as provide and seek funding for the Department of Education's Adopt a School program. The understanding stipulates that the Chamber will conceptualize, facilitate, coordinate, and implement projects under Adopt a School, which was an act out of 1998, to benefit public schools, their students, and particularly mineral development host communities, which are very much impacted by our activities. For most of you who don't realize this, you get actually 150% tax benefit on your donation. So it's a real opportunity for us to consider, since we, in fact, are already providing so many school facilities to so many of our communities. Chamber member companies have agreed to formally include the DepEd Adopt a School program in their social development and management plans, the public school education advancements projects from the kindergarten to high school, through a campaign dubbed as Minahan para sa Karunungan at Kinabukasan. Our chamber has committed to donate over 25 million seedlings over the next 5 years to the National Greening Program of Government. This commitment is on top of the Adopt a Mining Forest program of the Philippine Mine Safety and Environment Association. It might interest you to know that the mining industry has been planting over 1.5 million trees yearly, making it the largest contributor to our country's reforestation efforts and carbon sequestration. I think I might add that's even larger than the Philippine government's own program. Our chamber has been tapped as a key stakeholder and implementing partner by the United Nations Development Program in the introduction, implementation of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, or EITI, in the Philippines. We have reasons to champion this governance mechanism because we know this fits well in the Aquino administration's anti-corruption drive, and as an industry, it is our desire to be transparent in reporting all the taxes that we pay, both to the national and local governments. The speeches given by the Chinese Ambassador Liu Jinchao and Chilean Ambassador Roberto Mayorga during the conference were also testimonies of the importance of our mineral resources. We shall continue to harness the mining investment outcome of our President's visit to China and learn from and increase trade and economic cooperation with our trading partners in order to raise the two-way trade between the two nations. Now, I'm going to come to the second part of my presentation today, where we'll talk about updates within the industry and outside it, the challenges that we face, and some of the recommendations to these hurdles. Well, why has there been so much interest in our mining in recent years? Well, simply because we are one of the richest endowed mineralized countries, and yet we are one of the poorest. And much of these resources are yet to be tapped. It's been estimated that the potential mining wealth in the Philippines is anywhere from 800 plus billion or 47 trillion or 10 times our annual GDP. The latest Mines Geosciences Bureau figures on the Philippines' metallic mineral resources and reserves further highlight the reality of our richness, and these figures are for the metals alone. For the calendar year 2010, the Philippines' metallic production was pegged at over 111 billion pesos. For the 6 months of 2011, production was already nearly 64 billion. And if the production rate continues, we could end up well above 127 billion by end of the year. The National Statistics Coordination Board says the poverty threshold for the entire Philippines in 2009 was about 16,841 pesos, with poverty incidence for families at nearly 21% and about 27% of Filipinos within the poverty level. The Philippine mining industry is ready and able to help alleviate poverty in the country. In fact, a study by Dr. Ethan Capstan of INSEAD, who was doing a study in Ghana, stated that mining has a multiplier effect on employment of actually not at 12, but actually 28 times. Which means that for every direct job created by mining, 28 more jobs are actually indirectly created in allied and downstream industries. Operating metallic mines, well, we've got about 27. We've got a couple of nickel processing plants. I think there's one that's already operating, and we hope that the second large one continues. As you know, we have Pasar, a copper smelter, and one gold refinery. There are about 682 approved registered mining tenements. And there are some 2,000 applications under process. Now, not too many people know that historically mining in the Philippines has contributed much to our economy. In the 1970s, minerals accounted for about 1/5 of our exports. At its peak, mining contributed 24% of total exports. Mining appears to be regaining some lost ground, with the country posting in 2010 the highest GDP growth since 1986 at 7.3, and the mining industry, in fact, rebounded to a growth rate of 12.1% last year alone. Mineral exports led by copper, gold grew over 27%. From 1.87 billion, to 1.87 billion, from about 1.47 billion in 2009. In the first quarter of this year, mining accounted for 4.3% of the country's total exports. I'm not talking about mineral products like processed minerals from Pasar. This is mineral output. In the first quarter of this year, $513 million was produced, still quite a far cry from our heyday, but we are starting to move up. And while it was agriculture that helped keep the economy afloat in the first half of 2011, it was mining along with manufacturing that provided the much-needed boost to our economy against the backdrop of a global economic downturn in the second half of the year, as well as non-government spending. The Mines Geoscience Bureau estimates that investments from priority mining projects will reach $18 billion by 2016. Well, that's if all things run smoothly. I mean, that's a big if. The industry expects investments amounting to about 14 to 20 billion in the next 5 years. I believe if the president is really quite determined to provide jobs for the 94 million Filipinos, as we've seen with a multiplier of 28 to 1, it really can provide that added boost. During the Mining Philippines 2011 conference, we stressed that mining investments in our country reached about $1 billion, but could have easily gone over the 1 billion mark had some projects not been delayed. Mining investments could be much higher if only some of the issues and concerns are resolved. For instance, for 2011 alone, the original DENR figure was over $3.3 billion in investments. They then lowered that to $2.3 billion, and as October has rolled around, that number, I think, is coming down to about $1 billion. And that's partly, in my view, to the lack of permits being processed, the continuous cloud that has been hanging over the Tampakan project, and some other issues that we have all been able to discuss quite avidly recently. As you all know, there is a concerted effort to stop the growth of our industry, despite the industry's continuing efforts to meet the expectations of society as regards the impacts of minerals development on our communities and the environment. I mean, some people literally put roadblocks on front of us. Notable among these roadblocks are, of course, the no to mining in Palawan, the alternative mining bills. I think there's some 24, right, Rocky? The ban on open-pit mining in South Cotabato, with other provinces getting excited. I'm glad that my friend Jojo over here from the League of Provinces is here today. And also, we're starting to see problems arising from the Supreme Court by the issuances of the writ of kalikasan and additional suits that are being filed by many cause-oriented groups against mining projects like the one in the Zamboanga Peninsula, where in fact it was a Cebu-based NGO that filed the case, and it impleaded, ironically of all entities, the Chamber of Mines. There also is a seeming bias against the industry by the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples officials who allowed the proponents of the No to Mining movement to make a presentation to the NCIP, and without giving the mining industry a similar opportunity. We, in fact, made a complaint to the Office of President about this issue, and perhaps that there is a need for the NCIP to move out of the National Anti-Poverty Commission and perhaps maybe be better suited under the Office of the President. We in the Chamber of Mines submit that to ensure the success of our industry, the government and the private sector, in this case industry, should take bold steps to bring mining in our country towards world-class standards and work in partnership with key stakeholders in the implementation of those steps. For instance, in order to remove some of the roadblocks, we need to work on a few items. There exists legal infirmities that prevent our nation from benefiting fully from the fruits of the liberalization of our sector. These infirmities are the main roots of the reputational damage that large-scale responsible miners are now suffering from, and the underlying reasons why roadblocks are gaining some sympathy and adherence. For instance, the proliferation of illegal small-scale mining has given legitimate and responsible mining a bad name. Small-scale mining operators should be required to adhere to the same stringent environment standards imposed on us large-scale miners. Small-scale miners should likewise pay excise taxes and other taxes and fees. Moreover, the entire permitting process, regulation, control, and supervision of small-scale miners should be given to the DENR instead of the local government units, which do not have the technical competence to deal with fiscal and environmental issues related to mining, aside from the fact that there are too many issues of conflict of interest. After more than 10 years since its enactment, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act may have to be revisited. Of particular concern is how the since time immemorial standards, this is the words under the law, are being used in this accreditation of indigenous peoples and how ancestral lands and ancestral domains are identified and delineated. This may also be an opportune time to question the ownership concept of the IPRA law versus the Regalian doctrine as enshrined in our Philippine Constitution. We also recommend that the NCIP be educated formally on mining to give them a better understanding and appreciation of the industry. The 2 to 3 year delay in the remittance of the LGUs of their respective shares in the excise tax from minerals has for many years now been a cause for concern of local officials, and therefore one of the main reasons why the industry isn't getting much support from LGUs. This explains the skeptical attitude of some LGU officials towards the mining industry and their inability to fully appreciate the benefits brought by mining operation in their areas. Ironically, the economic benefits of LGUs from small-scale mining are readily available because it's the LGUs that issue the small-scale mining permits. So again, this is an issue for the national government to reconcile. An opinion on the ban on open pit mining in South Cotabato has been rendered by the Department of Justice, as well as the DNR, and even when existing, the Minerals Development Council, and has been given to all LGUs. Decisive action as to which law will prevail, national laws or local legislation, in order to bring an end to provincial ordinances that contradict and defy the national laws and damage this confidence is really needed. As contractors of the Philippine government, we mining companies, the FTAA and MPSA holders, should be helped by government in communicating with stakeholders. Responsible mining as an essential industry and human undertaking must be given emphasis in earth and social science subjects in elementary and high school. Instead, the no to mining is actually getting more voice by school teachers and principals to the students in the departments, in the public schools and in the private schools. So an informed citizenry, or in this case what we're suffering from, a misinformed citizenry, needs to better grasp mining-related issues so that they can distinguish between reality and propaganda. Well, the recent NPA attack on these 3 responsible mining operations in Surigao is a good indication that the industry has been a victim by trial by publicity, with the communist insurgents as prosecutor, judge, juror, and executioner. Media must learn to distinguish between good miners from bad miners. I'm glad we have some media friends here. We in the Chamber of Mines submit that we share the same advocacy with the Palawan movement on the item of the advancement of responsible mining. In fact, we challenge the proponents of the Palawan movement to change the name of No to Mining in Palawan to No to Irresponsible Mining in Palawan. If they do that, I will personally be the first to sign the No to Irresponsible Mining in Palawan movement so that we can help reach the 10 million target. But again, it is No to Irresponsible Mining. Allow me to talk about a topic of related importance. There is a misconception, even among some cabinet members, that a large percentage of the total land area of the Philippines, of 30 million hectares, will eventually be mined. I'm not going to tell you which ones. This is because the tenement maps of the Mines Geosciences Bureau show that 12 to 14 million hectares of the total land area have been covered by applications for exploration permits or for mineral agreements, and that the anti-mining NGOs claim and warn that the public that all these areas will be mined. Also, I would like to state that there are some cabinet members that think that just because you've been issued an MPSA doesn't mean you can start mining tomorrow. But unfortunately, even government doesn't seem to know its own regulation. While 40 to 47% of the country's land mass is indeed covered by such applications, the footprint of the 30 operating mining projects nationwide is really only 60,000 hectares, but could be increased by another 30,000 hectares in the 5 to 10 years. Or another way of looking at it as 0.2% of the total land mass. By comparison, this 60,000 hectares is only 36% of the land area of Quezon City. This widely held view that all areas covered by mining applications will eventually be mined should be corrected immediately. International industry figures indicate that out of 25,000 prospective mining projects, only 500 get to be drilled, of which only one will actually be mined. But most people don't seem to understand the non-recourse risk that mining companies have to undertake in putting a mining project forward. The statistics in the Philippines are even more discouraging, with only one mine getting developed for every 1,000 to 5,000 prospects. This is because not all mineral deposits may be mined properly and economically, depending on the geological setting in the area. Thus, it is often the case that after spending millions of dollars for exploration drilling and for detailed exploration drilling, a prospect is not pursued for not being feasible for one reason or another. The decision to proceed to mine development stage may be reached only upon the completion of a bankable feasibility study, and sometimes not even that. And this takes, as you know, some 10 to 15 years from exploration. Many of those who oppose mining say there is no such thing as responsible mining. I've been hearing that more and more. Now, we in the Chamber submit that responsible mining is possible, that, in fact, it is happening all over the country today. Mining firms today, especially the member companies of the Chamber of Mines, I must say, consciously and purposely strive to attain the ideals of responsible mining towards sustainable development of their host communities. These companies now have a more systematic planning of community and development projects, as well as various environmental concerns. Their commitment can be gleaned from their transparent consultations and communications with host communities, promotions and respect and fulfillment of the rights of indigenous peoples, our genuine contribution to host and impact communities' lives and well-being, even employment of various members of the community. Our National Minerals Development Policy emphasizes 3 parameters of responsible mining: economic growth, social equity, and environment protection. We at the Chamber have added a 4th, good governance. Companies who operate within these parameters should be given a chance to flourish and contribute to the attainment of our nation's goals. The Philippine Mining Act and the Minerals Development Policy are compelling considerations that provide our country and our people the opportunity to meet the needs of the present generation while creating resources that will help future generations meet their own needs without, I hope and dare say, bankrupting the environment. In the pursuit of projects, mining companies should uphold human rights. The benefits of mining should always be felt. Mining firms, as you know, should remain committed to the continuous improvement of the environment and the health and safety of our communities. Ladies and gentlemen, there really is no shortcut. There should be no corruption. And we actually want to ask you, when you experience shakedowns, extortion of any kind, we would like to ask your assistance in providing confidential information to us so that we could help provide the necessary action to be taken. Overall, the mining industry can act as a catalyst for strengthening the country's economic base. It is a lever that can induce greater economic, social, and cultural development. It can increase revenues, thereby reducing the country's budget deficit. It can also generate substantially increase exports and increase foreign exchange reserves. Likewise, it can help provide jobs and prevent the exodus of job seekers without affecting the very fabric of the social system, families. Ultimately, it will help reduce poverty that remains to be the greatest challenge of government. This is the challenge of responsible mining, which we at the Chamber of Mines advocate. We will build on the success of the Mining Philippines and work towards overcoming the various challenges that we face. In the end, we hope that the rich man who made wise use of his pot of gold. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said in the beginning, we remain undaunted, undeterred, despite harassment, despite violence inflicted on our companies and our industry members. We remain your champion for responsible mining in our country today. Thank you very much.
Philip, what would you say are the three most important positive developments in the mining industry today? So, Philip, what do you believe are the three most important things that government needs to do to generate greater confidence in investing in the Philippine mining industry? I guess that's, in effect, you're going to summarize a few of the key points you've made in your presentation.
Okay, actually I can think of one positive development, and actually that is, industry actually has come together. And we actually now are working very closely, cohesively. We are working better in an orchestrated manner. We are also better. We're now better equipped to have the right people working for us for industry, and importantly, we have the support of the industry members. So I think that's one of the most positive developments to date. So to that, I congratulate all of you. Give yourself a round of applause. Because, gentlemen, and I want to emphasize that, government is really, in many ways, still in a quandary as to what it wants to do with the mining sector. There have been so many voices and statements, actions made by various entities. And now more than ever, my appeal is that we actually have to come together and provide support when needed. And we should try to even think more proactively as opposed to reactively. One thing that we've done at the Chamber of Mines is that we've formed a public relations group. We have, in fact, as I mentioned, brought in Rocky Di Maculangan, who used to handle TVI. As many of you know, TVI was an embattled company for many years, literally in the throes of violence and a social pariah, and was actually vilified, but actually has turned that corner around. And, Rocky's helped do that with the company, and that's why we brought him into the Chamber of Mines. We've also brought in a good guy like Ronnie to help us on issues. We are actually very active now. We have a group working in Congress with legislators, with the Committee on Natural Resources, to actually help lobby the issues that we are facing. You see, there is a major concerted effort by our detractors, and they are all linked. And we have identified that. We hired an entity that did political risk analysis, some think tanks, to help study the question. And we have identified all our detractors. We know who they all are. We know their affiliations. We know their links. And I think I'm not going to go to what the government needs to do. I think we all know, we know that. It's simply that the government needs to implement the mining law. I mean, to me, that's the first and foremost. I mean, we can keep talking about legislation, but at the end of the day, we already have a very good law that just merely needs to be properly implemented. The second is, I would like to think, is there needs to be a forum where government actually meets with the stakeholders, primarily the mining industry, to be able to thresh out the issues, rather than we are battling and challenging the issues on one another in the media, on the streets. I mean, this is preposterous. While we champion and herald democracy, that's not the way democracy should be working. At least it's not working well. So we challenge the government to create the proper forum. Now, while we're heartened by the president creating a panel, let's look at that panel. I think the panel, the numbers are a little bit stacked against us in that panel. So, I don't want to get personal. So these are some of the things. So to me, the challenge should be not as far as government, because government will be merely reactionary. I mean, it's reacting to the public sentiment. So what we as an industry need to do, and what you as individual players and companies need to do, is to be more vocal. You need to be out there projecting yourselves, your companies, the industry in the most positive light possible, and actually engage, and not just sit on our hands and wait for the slugs to connect on our body, because that's what's been happening. And the Chamber of Mines cannot on its own and alone do it. We rely on the strength of the entire industry to come together. And I'm happy that it started, but we can't continue. We can't continue as we did in the past. We have to step up. And that's my challenge to you. If you want us to fight, well, we need the support. It's not just money. It's when we ask companies to tell us, what are you doing well? Give us the stories so that we can help articulate that. We can help come out with it. Please do it and give us the information. Don't hide under, whatever you're hiding and hoping that you want to stay under the radar for fear of getting it. I mean, we all need to speak up, because if we don't, they're going to pick us off one by one.
Don't go, Philip. Any questions from the floor? Yes, please.
You've talked a lot about a PR campaign and engaging with the communities, etc., but you didn't mention, I don't think, the church, which seems to me to be a particular challenge and a very difficult one. Even some of the hierarchy of the church who say that they're in favour of responsible mining. It's a different thing in a lot of the provinces with a lot of the priests who are radically opposed to any sort of mining, despite the fact that they use mobile phones and drive cars and have wristwatches and things like that. But could you respond to that, please?
It's a tricky issue, a tricky situation. But let's look at it fairly. My family comes from the province of Leyte, and I met the bishop in Palo, the archdiocese, which essentially handles Region 8. And he said, Philip, there's this mining activities going on, and the farmers are complaining, and we have to stop this. And so I said, please tell me a little bit more about it. You see, what happens is, and in fairness to many priests and bishops, is they're the last entity that people go to cry on their shoulders because they're not getting response from companies or the local officials or national officials. So they become the defender of the meek and the powerless. So they have taken it upon themselves to champion that faraway voice. And we cannot hold it against the church or some church members for doing that. Now, in many ways, there are, in cases like that, it's merely a question of enlightening everyone and communicating the issue. In fact, I promised, and I promised the bishop. In fact, right there and then, I called up Secretary Paje. And I said, Secretary Paje, you got to listen to the bishop. And I have friends in media in Region 8, so I said, please, go and find out. Well, ironically, what happened was when the media went there and they started interviewing people, the people were actually happy. And they said they were fine. And so I asked the media, I said, look, I don't want to be the one to explain that to the bishop. So can you go talk to the bishop and explain that to the bishop? Because at least you're independent, you're a third party, go and explain that. And I was happy that they did. So it's really a question of us getting the right people to talk to the right, using the right people to talk to certain people. because the issues of credibility are there. Now, it's true, there are going to be mining detractors, and many bishops that we keep hearing and seeing in the news are ideologically opposed. And there's very little we can do about that. Actually, the challenge there, and I'm glad media's there in the corner, is that maybe we can ask them to stop interviewing these people, because they're just going to be mouthing the same thing. And my challenge to media is maybe rather than go to the default opinion makers, maybe you can go to other people who might have a truer view rather than having the title of XYZ and giving that opinion, so that we can get a better representation of the situation. Now, yes, we are dialoguing with men of the cloth, and I'm actually happy to see that the new Archdiocese of Manila is now led by Archbishop Tagle, because I know him to be a very sober, balanced person, a very bright one. And I'm sure if the church hierarchy, which, by the way, is also filled with politics, gets proper people, people with the right mindset to present the issues, I'm confident over time we should be able to get a better shake. But again, it's really the challenge falls on us to make sure that we can get the voices heard to the right people so that we can move on. And again, it's also hoping that media will stop giving people too much importance when they shouldn't be even given any space.
Thank you, Philip. We're running out of time, so I'd like to open the floor to just one more question. Well, I'll ask the last question. Philip, there's as we all know, the leadership of the DNR has proposed increasing the government share for in contracts. We're calling this the 5% royalty for whatever. Could you please give us an update of where that proposal is and what the industry is doing through the Chamber of Mines to address that proposal?
Yes, actually, we've been opposing that from the outset. In fact, we've called it preposterous for the DNR to even suggest that you should start adding an additional 5% excise tax. I mean, the very reason that the mining law was actually passed was to create incentive for people to invest in the mining sector. And my answer to the government is that, look, while you've given on one hand, you're taking away on the other, and it becomes impossible. That is actually being studied now. I mean, it's truly understandable, though, for government to want more, as being the owners of the minerals. I guess the question really is finding the right formula. Can we find the right formula so that when mineral prices go up, the formula will allow a fairly even share of the benefits of the upswing, however, recognizing at the same time the risk that the investors had made. But you see, the flip side to that argument is that the government and the NGOs will say, yes, but if you think about it, while companies are taking the financial risk, it's the communities and the country that is taking the environmental risk. So that's why you're getting a big discussion now in government of the need to quantify the value of air, water, as key elements that should be considered in an entire evaluation of the feasibility of a mining project. So it's becoming more challenging. I really don't know what the final outcome will be. But my sense is that the President has said, and I've heard it through various cabinet members, is that a mining policy will come out soon. I don't know when soon is, but soon. And that at the end of the day, what's going to happen is everyone will be a little bit unhappy. Now, What does that signify? If you're taking clues from what the President's statements have been, he's already said that he is in favor of large-scale responsible mining. And he's a bit bothered by small-scale mining because it is difficult to regulate. But at the same time, he's also saying that the rightful share of the Philippine government and the Filipino people must be attained. So, you can see where the direction is going. Also, you're hearing that they're concerned about environmental issues. So there are questions about whether or not mining should be allowed in certain type of localities and terrains and areas of biodiversity, particularly small islands. If you see the recent action by the government on Sibuyan, that shows you a kind of general direction. So you're starting to see, without government actually articulating it or saying it that this is the final mining policy, you're starting to see a trajectory of what it might look like. And you can see that mining companies are not going to be entirely happy, and certainly the anti-mining movement will not also be happy because their entire movement goes to no to mining. So obviously mining cannot be stopped. It's a question, in my view, of how should it be regulated. So that's going to be the challenge, and as in anything, as Leo knows this very well as being a lawyer, the devil is in the details. So we really have a tough road ahead of us, but we obviously have great opportunities. The challenges are going to be there. It's really going to be a question of how we're going to meet that so we can mitigate the final terms. In many ways, we are going through a negotiation. And we really need to step up our communication. We need to step up our efforts to show and prove that mining is actually beneficial, and therefore the final terms and agreements of a mining policy can actually be laid out for us to move on and carry on with our projects.